Welcome to the Geekly. My name is Jules.
I'm Lex, and today we are talking about the first 4 episodes of Better Than Us, which is like a Russian sci-fi android show on Netflix. We've got the documentary The Institute, which is based off of the real-life alternate reality game that took place in 2008 to 2011 in San Francisco, although the creator doesn't like that term anyway. And then the next 3 episodes of Dispatches from Elsewhere, which is based on the documentary The Institute. So, yeah, fun stuff.
Okay, let's start with Better Than Us. It's a scenario where mankind and these robots have kind of fully integrated, and the robots are kind of there to help mankind, kind of like servants, I guess, kind of like slave/servants. And a new range of robots is basically about to hit the marketplace. There's a prototype that's sent to this kind of billionaire. The robot kills a guy, escapes, and she kind of attaches herself to this young girl called Sonia. So the show's going to be about people trying to reclaim the robot, and it's going to be about this robot kind of becoming part of this family, I guess. And also this guy called Georgie trying to keep his family together because his wife wants to take the kids to Australia. He's, struggling to kind of keep everybody together because he'd probably never see them again. So that's kind of a brief synopsis of what the show is, I think, moving forward. We've only watched the first 4 episodes of 16, so that's what's happening so far. Lex, what did you think of Better Than Us?
It actually reminded me of the TV show Humans, which ran from like 2015 to 2018. There are like 3 seasons of it. And it's kind of a similar concept. There's some sort of glitch that certain androids start to get consciousness, kind of similar to Westworld, and they start this sort of revolution, and she gets attached to one of the children. It might even be the daughter. I don't remember. It's been a while since I watched the show. But it's kind of a similar thing, because the thing with Arissa is that she has the ability to improvise, which again is similar to Westworld in that like the introduction of the reveries kind of hastened them into the achievement of consciousness. So there's like this sort of introducing free will makes these beings sentient. It was a bit weird because I don't really like any of the characters.
Neither do I. I completely agree with you.
Georgie is sort of an ass and incompetent, and I mean, okay, Sonia has to be like 3 or 4. She's not in school yet, and he just leaves her alone all day in the apartment and doesn't seem to think there's a problem with that. The ex-wife puts cameras in the apartment. I mean, just the fact that the ex-wife was like, oh yeah, you can live in our apartment with the kids now, we're leaving. I mean, that was kind of odd. She's basically setting him up and puts these cameras in to like catch him being a bad dad so she could terminate his parental rights. He's an arsonist. His son is just kind of a dick. I mean, he's a teenager. I think he's like 16, and I don't exactly know like what the age of consent and whatever is in Russia, but they remark at one point that he's 16, so you can't just boss him around anymore. And he gets served beer and isn't underage, but his girlfriend is underage, so I don't know. There's a lot of like societal, cultural things I don't really understand. Everybody smokes in the future, which is the thing I've noticed about all of the foreign language sci-fi things we've watched so far, is that everybody still smokes, which you would not see in any British or American sci-fi because, cigarettes are bad. So yeah, I watched the first few episodes and I was just kind of like, I don't really know how I feel about this, but then I got to like the 4th episode and I found that I was actually interested in seeing what happened next. I don't know if it's just kind of a like watching a car crash kind of interest, or I'm starting to become engaged with these characters.
Yeah, no, I kind of have very similar feelings actually. In the beginning, the ex-wife, I'm taking the kids, there's nothing you can really do about it. And I felt bad for him, like I wanted him to succeed as a father in that moment. But then he basically failed at every opportunity given to him. He abandoned Sonia. I think that's before he even knew that the robot was living there. Like you said, he's an arsonist. He's just a bit of a shit in general. And so then I wasn't really pulling for him. Sonia's completely adorable, the little girl. Is it Igor, his son? Jesus Christ. I mean, he is just the worst. This is like the family that you assume you're meant to be relating to because they're going up against all these kind of shady mobsters. But like you said, who is there to like here? I think there was some decent world building. I don't know about you. I felt like this society was something that I would like to maybe get a bit deeper into. I thought the pacing was quite good. The show wasn't holding on to secrets unnecessarily for episode after episode. You know, the robot attached itself to Sonya, and some shows you might have gone like 6 episodes before the dad knows that the robot's kind of living there, but he knew immediately. And then the mum watching on these cameras, which is such a bizarre set of circumstances. She knows that the robot's living there, and yeah, it's got a bit of, you know, quite nice pacing. There's a bit of depth. You know, we're getting, like I said, some good world building, some interesting ideas about the liquidators who are not thrilled that robots are basically being brought in more and more into society. You know, they're kind of humanists, human rights, humans first. So yeah, I think the show's got some depth, and I'd be interested to see what else it's kind of got up its sleeve, really.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see where it goes from here. I still don't know if I like the show, which is a weird thing, but like I'm interested in what these people are going to do and how it's going to all play out. And like you, initially, I kind of identified with Georgie, and I was sort of on his side, and like, you know, oh man, the ex-wife is such a bitch, and he's just, you know, he's hard up and he's trying to do his best, and then he left Sonya alone all day. And I was kind of like, all right, that's kind of bad parenting. And then he set his workplace on fire. Well, no, before that, there was like, he took the bribe to cover up the murder. And, okay, it was like, that's sort of sketchy. And it was just one sketchy thing after another. So he became very difficult to empathize with. And so I started to empathize with the ex-wife, and then she did the camera thing, and I was like, well, that's kind of shitty. And then I just started, like, really feeling bad for these kids, and maybe that's why Igor is such a dick, because his parents are really fucked up.
Every aspect of the TV show, it's either male gaze, it's either male fantasy, or it's misogyny. But I'd say like 95% of the robots we've seen are these kind of like sexy female sex robot type robots.
Yeah, the male robots look like dorks.
Yeah.
Let's just say that. Like, the female robots are all super sexy. The male robots look like Ken dolls, basically, and you imagine that they're like equally not anatomically correct, whereas, you know, the female bots are, well, they're saying that the Arissa is kind of the prototype in this future line of bots that will like serve people and be nannies and teachers and doctors, etc. But it seems like the female bots are basically exclusively used for sex, whereas the male bots are kind of like there's the home assistance one and a waiter one and stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely very male centric.
Even, you know, human to human, the men in it are very misogynistic. There's a moment, and I wasn't actually sure if she was human or a robot, but he basically tells this woman to shut up and does this kind of hand gesture, and then she immediately like stops talking. You know, again, maybe the people who made this, maybe it's kind of a social commentary on parts of Russia, and that's just not something I'm particularly aware of. I could believe it.
It's possible that it's trying to be a social commentary and maybe not necessarily succeeding. It's difficult to judge a sci-fi show from another culture because you don't really know like which parts are made up and which parts are true to life, you know, as opposed to kind of watching a drama or a comedy or something that takes place in our real world, because this is set a bit in the future, so it's kind of an imagining of where Russia will be in a couple decades or so.
I think it's mostly going to be about the liquidators and kind of this new world order, this new balance between, you know, robots and humanity, seeing where that falls down. I don't really know what's going to happen to the family. I did find it interesting that Igor at one point said, my dad died 3 years ago. And so obviously that's implanted immediately that Georgie must be some kind of robot. But as robotic as performance is, like, I don't know if that's on the cards.
I don't necessarily think it means that he was a robot, because 3 years ago he was like the head surgeon at the hospital, and something happened and he left and became basically a coroner in a morgue. So there's that conversation between him and his dad where his dad is in the hospital and he's like, you should be running this hospital and you let everybody down, and Georgie says, you know, I didn't let anybody down, I was let down. So there's some mysterious thing in his past, and you sort of imagine that either it was a result of the breakdown of his marriage or the cause of the breakdown of his marriage, and that's potentially what Igor is referring to, that his dad used to kind of be a successful, productive member of society, and he's sort of devolved into this loser who sleeps on the couch in the morgue and really only talks to his android employee and takes bribes and does all sorts of shady stuff.
Let's move on to the Institute.
Yeah, so this was a weird experience because it markets itself as a documentary, but it is not completely a documentary. Like, it's a documentary up to a certain point, and then it kind of transitions into a bit of a mockumentary. Like, I ended up at the end of it having to do a whole bunch of research and Googling and reading articles and stuff, because similar, I'm sure, to the people actually playing the game, I could not tell what was real and what wasn't by the end of this film. Like, the whole ending to the game, I thought, was kind of dumb and petty, and the guy even said that there were players who expected to have this kind of big sci-fi showdown, and he did the seminar essentially to piss those people off. And I was sort of like, you got all these people invested in this, like, 3-year-long game, and then you just say fuck you to them. That's sort of a shitty move.
Yeah, I thought that was incredibly arrogant, personally. He's created this thing. He wanted to put beauty in the world. He said he wanted to give people a mission and permission to go out into the city and explore. And, there must have been thousands of people playing this game at some point.
It was like 7,000, I think. 7 to 10,000. I've seen various accounts of, like, how many people went to the induction thing. I don't remember exactly how many actually made it to the end. I think it was only a few hundred that actually made it to the end. But, yeah, I think overall it was 7 to 10,000 people participated over the 3 years.
I mean, you're going to have so many different interpretations of what the game is. Some people, they take it the wrong way. They become like, the hardcores. But to say that, there was a right and a wrong way to interpret the game, I just think is incredible arrogance. And I didn't enjoy when he said that. And I don't think that guy came off particularly well. I can believe that, money was the issue and that's why they had to give it the ending that they gave it. But if I was playing the game and that was the ending, I would be disappointed. I'm not necessarily saying I would need to have some kind of, fantastical battle as he suggested some people were looking for. But to have what was essentially an all-day holistic seminar, I would have been probably quite disappointed with that. And I thought it was interesting when people said that the mood in the room was that they thought they'd lost. They were puzzling over what decision they took that sent them down the wrong path to have this kind of ending. I mean, how would you have felt if that was, you got there and it was essentially, chairs, maybe some nibbles, and a guy doing like a seminar? How would you have felt if that had been the ending?
I would have been incredibly disappointed and let down and I mean, some of the people were like, just because the ending was disappointing doesn't mean that the story wasn't good, and I really enjoyed all of the lead up to it, like some of the people who made it all the way through the 3 years. But I think the way people described it and the way I interpreted it, this kind of citywide scavenger hunt and sort of stepping away from, like we mentioned this in terms of Dispatches for Elsewhere, it's kind of a very analog game. They mentioned that they couldn't rely on the fact that all of the players had smartphones at that point in time, which kind of contributed to it. But it was all about finding clues and piecing things together, and I sort of think that they would have been better off with no ending.
Yeah.
I think like one of the participants said, that like he didn't go to the final thing, he didn't see how it ended, and so for him the war is kind of still happening on the streets, and that's a fun thing to believe in. And I think that would have been more true to the spirit of the game as far as the other participants put on it. I really don't like the creator, and I read some interviews with him, and he just seems like an ass who's like a very pretentious ass. Maybe you have to be a pretentious ass to like think that you can pull something like this off. I don't know. But yeah, it did seem to be, inviting people to play and inviting people to let go of their inhibitions and see the world in a way they might not necessarily notice going through their everyday life. And a lot of the people felt really liberated by it. Like one of the participants said, it was great to suddenly, be looking for beauty in the world and not just, I'm doing my laundry, I'm going to work, blah, 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 and stuck in the routine kind of thing. And then to have this sort of fuck you ending, kind of, it takes all of that away, basically, was my feeling.
Yeah. I think if you're going to do something that takes up 3 years of people's lives, you either need to commit to an ending at the beginning, or you need to commit to not an ending at the beginning. Because I think, just like you, having some kind of open ending or no ending would have been far better than what they got, or a kind of planned years in advance kind of ending. I just think they did, I always refer back to the TV show Lost, where I think they had no sense of where it was going until like they knew that the show had a year left or something, and they just created this very underwhelming ending. I think you do sort of owe people a duty of care. They may not have thought it was going to last 3 years at the beginning or whatever, but you just can't do that to people. You can't instill them with such wonder and hope and divine nonchalance and then just bin them. That was what I found most disappointing about it. I think just the lack of vision, the idea that they just considered themselves to be like puppeteers, and they were there and then they were gone. People are supposed to just be, oh well, yeah, it's over, and move on with their lives. But like that woman said, she went into a funk for a month. People were really invested in it. It really captured the whole city and potentially people from far further afield. And like I said, I found the guy, there was a lot of kind of arrogance, I think, particularly with him. Some of his underlings, they seemed okay. But and it was so odd that he found this random guy. He said they immediately connected.
Yeah, I didn't like the other guy either.
No, they had all these similar interests. And suddenly the guy's just hired as an actor to kind of do this seminar. It was so like short-sighted. It was just, very disappointing.
I don't think they planned to have it go for 3 years when they started out, but I do think after the first year they should have sat down and been like, okay, we need a plan of where we're going to go from here and how it's going to end, if it's going to end, how much longer it's going to play out, and what we're going to do, rather than waiting till waiting 3 years into it and discovering that they've run out of money, so they have to end it, and kind of hastily scrabbling this really kind of shoddy ending together. I also think that having the Jejune Institute be the winner was kind of a mistake. They spent all of this time trying to like invest people with the divine nonchalance and seeing beauty in the world and embracing magic and stuff, and then they basically just delivered this kind of corporate capitalist sanitized version of creativity and magic, and one of the participants said, you can't bottle that and sell it to people, but that's exactly what they did. It ruined the whole message of the installation piece.
Yeah, the thing that kind of bothered me is that, and I would definitely be one of these people, but the people that got involved seemed to be like a very similar kind of person. They wanted to believe that there was magic out there in the world. They wanted to believe that magic was real, and just going left instead of right in their normal lives maybe could have led them on some kind of adventure. And the right people all found this, and so they seemed to be people that were maybe gentle souls and people with a certain, childlike exuberance. And so for them, I feel, to have had this kind of crushing finale that maybe they didn't want, I felt was an extra harsh fuck you to them.
It was a betrayal, essentially.
It was.
They put their trust into this game, and they got fucked over in the end.
I don't know about you, but I would have quite liked more about the people that took it the wrong way. I think the guy put a line in, he said that it became people's reality, not the fantasy that it was intended to be. And he played this phone message of this woman that said, the Elsewhere Society, like, you've got to have more to defend yourselves from Jejune than just these little, like, pathetic ramblings. People are interfering with my wavelengths and I'm being stalked and something like this. And she obviously, it was all in her head. She believed it to be real. Instead of it all being about maybe the people that had been let down at the end, I would have probably liked a bit more of some of the ways that the game went wrong. Maybe some of the ways that the creators had to kind of struggle to keep people within the game, because it was a bit one note, and at the end of it I didn't really feel like I'd learned anything new.
I definitely agree with that, particularly because the creators' response to it I felt was kind of cavalier. Jeff Hall is the creator, and like when he was talking about this woman and the other people who's like kind of took the game too seriously, he seemed to be a little dismissive of them, like, oh my god, how could they take this so seriously, rather than, we didn't think about this and we should have, and we kind of fucked up and put people in precarious mental positions. He just sort of, yeah, he seemed very dismissive of it, and like it wasn't his responsibility that some of these people with difficulties telling the difference between reality and fantasy were getting kind of more sucked into their own personal delusions, and the game was actually kind of quite harmful to them in that respect. Watching him talk about it and hearing the tape, I did feel like he had a responsibility to these people. I don't know what he could have done, but I guess overall there wasn't a lot of foresight put into the game. It was just kind of like, oh, I want to do this weird art thing, and I'm gonna get people involved and see what happens. To me, that seemed a little bit irresponsible, particularly with the fact that it was kind of a reality bending fantasy game.
So yeah, I think after seeing this, it sounds like we both kind of come down on the side that the creators were at fault. I mean, did they do too good a job at creating such an amazingly immersive world? Or were they just, was it just too half-assed?
I think it was a mix of two things. I definitely think that Hull's ambition exceeded his ability. He did put a lot of time and effort into creating the world and the characters and building up elsewhere, even before the game started, like years of developing the characters and the world and everything in that. So, I mean, I think, potentially that was maybe a little too developed and not necessarily, there should have been kind of exit strategies where people could remind themselves that this was in fact a game. The ending was definitely half-assed, and I think he didn't think a lot of things through completely. It was more about like, oh, I want to do this cool thing and it's going to be a great artistic achievement, but he neglected the fact that real people were going to be involved who didn't know they were part of an art installation.
I think you maybe need to have some kind of very particular and purposeful wall breaking within a game like this to just kind of ground people, bring them back to reality. The people that got it right were the people that, were really hoping that there was more to the world. They wanted to go out and see the beauty, but there would be also people that were so desperate for that to be the case that they would engage with it so passionately. There are always going to be these people that just take it a bit too far. So I think the creators really did owe a duty of care to every participant, and maybe even at the beginning, as difficult as it would have been, they could have just started by saying this is a game. It would have, slightly ruined some of the fantasy, but you've just got to look after people because mental health is a very delicate thing. And it's sad that there were casualties of this kind of fictional fantasy war.
I don't know that having a kind of disclaimer at the beginning that this is a game would have really ruined the fantasies. You think about Renaissance fairs and LARPing and even D&D and TTRPGs and stuff like that. People go into it knowing it's a game, but also willing to suspend disbelief and just play. And they become fully immersed in these worlds, and yet each of these worlds is built in with a bit where the players, if they need to, can step out of the pretend and spend some time in the real world and reorient themselves, and then go back into the fantasy whenever they want, or they're ready to, or not go back into the fantasy if that's a thing. I imagined what I would do if I was in San Francisco in 2008 and came across one of these flyers. To be perfectly honest, I spent so much time in my own head walking around, I probably wouldn't have noticed the flyers. But hypothetically, if I noticed the flyers and pulled the tabs and called the number and kept getting these messages about the Jejun Institute, I 100% would have showed up. And I probably would have ended up being one of the people who took it a little too seriously and got my entire perception of reality massively fucked up. I wasn't even in the game, and I viewed the ending as a betrayal. So if I had made it to that point, and that was the ending I got, I definitely would have been the one woman who went into a month-long funk. I would have been incredibly depressed after that for God knows how long. So yeah, I think they definitely should have taken better care of their players. And he's apparently planning another such game, which is sort of very secretive, and he's not giving out any details about it. And I don't think he's learned his lesson from the Elsewhere resume society
Yeah.
thing.
I was just going to ask you about that, actually. I was going to ask you about your opinion of such games within the world and whether they do more harm than good. Should there be kind of, should it be a movement? And, much like escape rooms, if it's an entirely different thing, but there was an absolute explosion of escape rooms over the last kind of 3 or 4 years. Do you think we live in a world where there are enough people that feel the way that kind of you and I do, and maybe feel the way these kind of the people that were participants do, and that there could be a whole new wave of this kind of game around the world? And I guess, do you think that there should be, and do you think it's a positive thing to kind of give adults this kind of childlike experience again, to kind of remind us of the way the world can be viewed?
I think adults don't play nearly enough. We've progressed into a very work-centric society where it's industrious to work 80 hours a week and to not have a good separation between public and private and, work and home, particularly at the moment where people are working from home. But, it's looked upon as something, successful people have these ridiculous, crazy schedules where they work 12 hours a day and sleep at the office and, never really go home and don't really have lives outside of work and don't really have friends or, loved ones, or they get to a certain point and they're like, they don't have kids, they don't have a partner, that all they have is work. And, I mean, even, just the normal 40-hour work week, it's incredibly, although I know in the UK it's 36, 37 hours, but in the States it's 40 hours. And, it's incredibly difficult working that 37 to 40 hours a week to have a life outside of work. You get off work around 5, you've got to make dinner, maybe you have kids, you've got to help them with their homework, you've got, chores around the house, you've got errands to run, your weekends are usually spent doing like grocery shopping, yard work, the things you don't get done during the week. So the real question is, when do you play? And I think playing is a very essential part of being human. You look at all of the other primates, they all incorporate play throughout their lives. And we're kind of abnormal in the fact that we've cut that out, and it's sort of frowned upon for adults to play, and adults forget how to play for the most part. So yeah, I think games like this and experiences like this are very necessary as part of our society to get us out of ourselves, to get us out of those ruts and those routines that we get into of going to work, coming home, making dinner, sitting in front of the TV, or getting on Twitter, or playing Call of Duty for hours on end just to like de-stress. And these sort of alternate reality games are a way to step away from the technology and kind of reconnect with each other in the world in a way. But there does need to be safeguards in them. It can't just be this total free-for-all where there are absolutely no rules. There are no one's looking out for the players. No one's kind of making sure that everyone's okay and that everyone knows all the parameters. I mean, like, if a game like this started in Canterbury, I am now going to be paying attention to every single flyer that I see on the telephone pole and pulling the tab, if there is a tab, just for the possible potentiality of playing, being involved in something like this.
Yeah, I would absolutely devour one of these if I came across one. If I knew that there was one in England somewhere, I'd probably travel to it. I don't know how, but I just feel like it needs to be something that's, almost, a university should take it upon themselves to like create one of these. It should be something taught almost, the ability to kind of instill this kind of feeling into people. It would be such an undertaking. Unfortunately, it would require so much money. You just don't know how it would be possible, but it's the kind of thing that humanity needs. And it needs to be unexpected, and it needs to toe the line between, is this real? But also at the same time, like you said, just making sure that nobody genuinely gets hurt. But yeah, it's such a fantastic idea. And I almost struggle to believe it came from the mind of such a twat. A very worthwhile experience, and something that he probably tells everybody, yeah, I was the guy, without having given too much care to the people actually playing the game. It was more about something on the CV for him, and it spawned a really lovely TV show as well. So yeah, I just didn't really feel like I learned much new from the documentary, and I liked seeing them dance. Like, they had the the hidden cameras showing them dancing with the Sasquatch. It's nice to know that that part was real. I liked seeing the woman who just was reduced to tears, you know, remembering the good times, remembering the friends she made along the way. But I just feel like maybe it would have been more interesting to see the people that this guy and the creators, the people that challenged them, the people that made him kind of seemingly angry and frustrated, the people that maybe he wanted to punish, seeing their stories. But yeah, it was, you know, it was just like a kind of bonus episode to the TV show, really.
That's probably a good point to migrate to Dispatches from Elsewhere, which is like my new favorite show of all time.
Yeah, so we watched episodes 6, 7, and 8 this week. Briefly, in episode 6 and 7, they've kind of gone off into their own game now, kind of led by Fred Wynn. They make their way to the game finale, but in kind of an unexpected way. And then in episode 8, Lee the architect, kind of at this point she knows that they're an interesting group, shall we say, as she decides to give them some kind of bonus levels at the end of the game. Again, really beautiful, really heartwarming, and heartbreaking as well.
It was a very emotional ride, and I am generally not that emotionally affected by film and TV. I'm you know, people make fun of me because I don't cry at movies. I even like comedies, I very rarely laugh out loud. It takes a huge amount to get me to kind of, I mean, like I feel things and I sympathize with characters and whatever, but I don't really express it outwardly. I'm just kind of observing what's happening, and I'm always sort of aware that, you know, these people aren't real. But this show in general and these characters have really gotten to me. Like I actually genuinely love all four of them, and I see myself in all four of them. I want to be their friend. I want to hang out with them. I want to like call them up and be like, hey, let's go do this. And you know, there was a moment with Peter at the thing the second time he went to go take the microphone away from the girl. This kind of like fuck my life moment while he was sort of psyching him up, like literally had me giggling out loud at just the absurdity of it. And then when Peter and Simone went on their date, it was so awkward, and they were both doing such the wrong thing, and Simone was like self-sabotaging, and I was just watching it thinking like, why are you guys doing this to each other? By the time I got to episode 8, like I was genuinely heartbroken. Like I was just kind of wandering around the house feeling like very sad. I ended up watching a couple episodes of Brooklyn Nine-Nine because I didn't know what else to do to make the sad go away. But yeah, it was kind of a weird experience for me because I don't often feel that from various media.
Let's talk about the Cave of Kelpius, which that was the name of the episode, so I assume that's the place that they all ended up. That was an emotional roller coaster. I mean, it's similar to the documentary. Actually, I felt it was kind of an underwhelming ending. The message was, put aside your differences, come together for the betterment of mankind. It was kind of that kind of thing. But then when Peter went up on the stage to kind of pull Clara down and to say to her, this isn't real, there is a real Clara, and he'd kind of taken the game too far. I watched that last week, and when it came to watching it again for the podcast, I couldn't watch it again. I got to the point where Octavio was on the stage and everybody was kind of there. I saw Peter start to move. I had to skip forward because I consider myself a bit of everybody, not so much Janice, but a bit of everybody. And I just thought, God, like that is something I could have done. And I found it so difficult to watch. And so it was nice that, and again, like that was her first solo. Like you said, he went and stole the mic and deprived her of her second solo as well. And it was nice that he had this kind of redemption moment within the space of an episode. But oh God, I just wanted the earth to kind of open up and swallow me, even though I wasn't the person in question doing the thing. Like I just found that so difficult to watch.
It was incredibly difficult, and it was like absolutely heartbreaking, and like it kept cutting back to like his teammates and the look on their face, and obviously they felt very similar to the way you felt. I mean, one, they'd just gotten this huge letdown, and it was very obvious that team, our team, felt that the ending was quite underwhelming, and they each had their sort of different reactions to that. But then like Peter just couldn't accept that. I mean, and then you could sort of see that coming because all along he needed to believe this was real, and he'd suddenly been told that it wasn't real after everybody kind of came around to believing that it was, and he sort of ran with that. And just like his refusal to accept that it had all been a charade or a hoax, yeah, it was devastating. You could feel his loss.
I think most of all because Peter was the one that had changed his life most dramatically since they started playing the game. Yeah. He seemed to have grown. He'd quit his job, and I think that these new feelings and this new kind of confidence he had, he didn't want it to be based on this lie. And that's like you said for the documentary, it was that betrayal. And when he was having these kind of not hallucinations or flashbacks, but kind of he could see her like in his mind's eye, Clara saying, "No matter what's about to happen, just remember how you feel, and it doesn't matter that it was just a game. Just still, you've got to take this energy out into the world." And I thought that was kind of an important lesson for people watching this. It doesn't matter if it's a game. You have learnt these skills, and it was real for you. That's what matters. And just his heartbreak was just it was devastating.
Yeah, and each one of them kind of had their moment of heartbreak at the after party. Because Janice was kind of dismissed very quickly by the younger members, and she was like, "Well, I'm going to go find my friends," but then her kind of younger self acting as the voice in her head, kind of the doubts that all of us have about ourselves was like, but are they really your friends, or are they just more people who are tolerating you? And Fredwin was trying to get all of the facts so he could process it and accept the fact that he was wrong, and he sort of had to come to the realization that he was wrong and he'd missed kind of the most important part, and then he sort of took up the hunt for Janice. I found the relationship between Janice and Fredwin is just so touching. And then there was the moment when Peter and Simone were dancing, and she had finally worked up the courage to tell him how she felt, and he thought that she was just pitying him, and was like, this doesn't make me feel good. And to her, that was the Sasquatch even said, that was a cold rejection. So you got to feel all of their disappointment and all of their expectations and all the magic and dreams that had been fostered by this game kind of come crashing down on them.
I think all the characters in this will be very relatable to a great many people, including me and you. So we're rooting for these people, and there are certain scenarios where we want them to succeed. And I think one of them was obviously wanting Peter and Simone to kind of have some kind of happy ending. But another person that's, I think, had a really great journey during this season is Fredwin. And I just think even within these 3 episodes, he's shown growth already, because in episode 6, he's in this, I don't know where they were, like this museum or something, and he has this outburst because he's in his mind palace and he cannot figure out what's happening. He can't resolve the problem. He can't understand the problem. And he has this very childlike outburst, and Peter manages to kind of hug him and rein him in. And then we get to episode 8, where Janice leaves the little diner and Fredwin knows that something's wrong. He's created this human connection with Janice. And he knows, maybe from the tone of her voice or because he's been to her house and seen Lev, he knows that something's wrong. He follows her to the hospital, and he's with her as she turns off Lev's life support machine. And just this self-awareness that he's never had before, this sudden self-awareness, was so interesting to see that kind of growth for Fredwin. And when he asks her again, "What can I do?" 2 episodes ago, Fredwin would never have asked that. His change is what they've all changed in great ways, but his change is potentially the most profound. And I just love it when she says, "Why don't you talk to him?" Or he says, "Should I talk to him? You're meant to do that to people in comas." And he says, "How much does he know about subliminal advertising?" And she looks at him and just says, "Almost nothing." And so he's just having this conversation with comatose Lev about subliminal advertising, which is such a him thing. But this self-awareness is not a him thing. And I think at the end of the season, whatever happens, it'll be so nice for people who have related these people. Think of Fredwin as you, think of Peter as you, etc. And to see the growth. And so we all know that we are capable of this growth, but we have to change. It's not too late, but we have to make active strides to change. I think, Fredwin's potentially the best case scenario for what change can do and what human interaction can do as well. He's someone that we talked about last week, about the fact that maybe he's been locked away, doing his own thing in his nice house, maybe in his own head, but he's actually socialising with people now, and he's learning what it is to be a human being just through dialogue. And his change is, one of the most interesting, I think.
I think you made a really good point with referring to it as self-awareness, because it's not like he suddenly knows how to be a person, or like to be a normal person, but he is aware of the fact that he doesn't know how to be a normal person, and he's gotten to the point where he's like, there's that moment in the hospital where he's sort of talking to himself, like, I should go, no, maybe I should stay, I don't know, I don't know what to do right now, and he's like, maybe I should just stop talking, and Janice kind of takes pity on him and says, I would like for you to stay. And so he's like, okay, and he pulls up the chair, and he ends up like holding Lev's other hand with her, and it's a really touching moment. But so he's aware of his own limitations, and he's begun asking other people for help and advice on what he should do. It's kind of similar to the moment when he shows up at Janice's house in the middle of the night, and he's like, I'm doing it again, aren't I? And she kind of says, like, yeah, you've gone off the rails a little bit, but okay, come in and we'll talk about it. I think it's a really important change, and probably one that many people overlook, that, just because you are a certain way, you don't have to completely rewrite your personality. You don't have to, like, completely ignore your flaws. Just acknowledge them and let other people know that you have these things you can't do and you need help. And that doesn't make you less of a person. It doesn't say anything about you. It's actually a very vital part of being human, of saying, you know what, like, I suck at doing A, tell me what I should be doing, and just reaching out and making connections with other people.
Yeah, I think the moment for me where Fredwin, it was kind of like a spell being broken, was when he was at the bar talking to the actor who played Clara, and she basically just, she drops this line, so what if I'm challenging? And he looks at her and he goes, so what if I'm challenging? As if to completely relate to that. It's not my problem, it's their problem. So what if I'm challenging? And he has this beautiful moment of realisation. I think the cinematography throughout this whole show has been wonderful. But it's this moment where he's sitting in a chair, and I think it's one of the Jejune Foundation's kind of ideas that were on the flyers at the beginning. And he's watching all of these screens showing him moments from his own life. And you see him looking, he smiles at some, but then he looks distinctly uncomfortable for some of them as well. And he comes back out of this kind of dream state, this perfect moment of clarity and self-awareness. And he says to her, what if it's not? What if it's our problem too? And he walks away, and suddenly it's, like I said, it's just like this spell being broken. And he suddenly has this rush of self-awareness. And he goes straight over to the group and says, Janice is missing. We are her friends, are we not? Let's go out and find her. And I just, I've only seen him in one film before. But I mean, when award season comes around next year, like, I don't know if shows like Dispatches from Elsewhere really get that much consideration at Emmys or Golden Globes, but if he isn't nominated for something because of this, like, I've just found his performance throughout the whole season to be absolutely magical. And yeah, that was just a really amazing moment, I thought.
I even texted you at one point. It was just like, I'm really loving Fredwin at the moment. And it's weird because in the beginning I was just like, oh my god, this guy is insufferable. But like every episode he's evolved in a certain way and become more human and more three-dimensional. And I mean, Andre Benjamin does him like so well. I think probably my favorite line is like when you mentioned him coming up to Peter and Simone when they're dancing, and he's like, Janice is missing and she's our friend, and they're kind of like, oh, and he's like, we should go help her because that's what friends would do, and they're like, yeah, we should do that, and he's like, a friend would do this quickly. Like, oh, okay. And they all run off trying to find Janice.
He had some very good lines actually in these 3 episodes.
He has some awesome lines. Like, I mean, probably most of my favorite lines come from Fredwin. And just the absolute deadpan delivery of them. Like, I mean, he says these completely ridiculous and absurd things very seriously, and you know that he means them absolutely, but they are absurd.
Yeah, I think when they were walking through the graveyard as well, and he was sending them out to talk to people, he said, Simone, go over and talk to those goth kids. She said, Fredwin, those are like mourners at a funeral. That was so funny.
Yeah.
I liked when Peter was attacked by clothing.
I love his response to it too, of, I wasn't actually attacked and we're never going to speak of this again.
again, like every episode I watch of this, they drop in some really like amazing quotations, almost like mantras sometimes, and I've written a couple of them down. Janice says, "People are just people. All you have to do is talk to them," which I think is really interesting because people can blow just simple thing like conversation way out of proportion, like it's this Herculean task.
Yeah, I think that was a really important thing for Simone here as well, because she's so self-conscious that she judges herself so harshly, and she was saying, "I really admire this about you" to Janice, and Janice was just kind of like, "Well, you can do it. Anybody can do it." And I mean, Janice's whole thing about she has all these doubts and insecurities, and she's constantly telling herself that she's just this crazy old woman that people put up with, but she still, like, it doesn't really stop her. She still kind of makes the effort to go out there and do stuff. There was a quote that, like, I tweeted. It was something that Clara said about, she'd wanted to originally create magic in the world, but then she realized she didn't just want to create beautiful things, she wanted to actually change people. And like, as a creator, I mean, I've literally tried to explain that feeling for decades now and not been able to verbalize it, and then this show just kind of like encapsulated this feeling, this indescribable feeling I've had, which I've felt quite a lot in watching this. The various experiences of the different characters, the various things they've said about themselves, the various things that have been said about them, just like, yes, why have I never been able to say that before? And like, it's very much like this show is kind of speaking my inner thoughts, which is weird.
Another one was when Peter said to the group, "If I don't make it back, thanks for being my friends." My heart just couldn't cope with that one.
I think I probably identify with Peter the most out of all four of them. Maybe it's an age thing, because we're close to the same age and just like in similar places in our life. But yeah, so his kind of heartbreaking moments were particularly poignant for me.
Any comments on Lee, the creator? Because I think it was interesting that the episode began again with "Imagine you are Lee," or "Imagine Lee is you," and it talked about someone with a huge amount of regret, and it's someone that was just really trying to make right. And I thought that was another very relatable kind of person for that. I think a lot of people probably latch on to that. And obviously we find out, we don't know how yet, but she's somehow responsible for the death of Clara. I think she's, again, somebody that a lot of people will relate to. And I think she's as lost as many people playing the game. And she clearly identified something in Clara that she thought was worth telling the world about. And she's very intriguing. And I just find it intriguing as well that she's taken it upon herself to create this whole extra section of the game for these four people that she's clearly seen something in.
Yeah, I really liked that part, and kind of how she was monitoring this particular group through the whole thing, because they kept doing things she hadn't anticipated when she'd anticipated so much of the game. I did find her a really interesting character, and I do think she is someone that a lot of people can identify with, because like as she said at one point, I've done everything right, but I still have nothing. She has all this money, she has all this success, she's achieved all of these things, but she still feels like she doesn't have anything meaningful in her life. And I think a lot of people can identify with that, particularly our generation, who was kind of told to, like, that if we did all the right steps we would succeed in life, and then the world has kind of fucked itself multiple times in our adult lives, and that's not really been a possibility. And even other generations who have done all of the right things and still ended up kind of dissatisfied with where their life has been, kind of the Janices of the world, who look back and think, I sort of settled for something, and it wasn't a bad something, but I didn't do what I wanted to do. And I think Lee also encapsulates that. Like, she did everything she was supposed to do, and she still has all of this regret.
Where do you think this story is going to move next?
I really don't know, but like I'm kind of scared that it's gonna be disappointing. We only have 2 episodes left, and I don't know how it's going to end. I saw somebody on Twitter said, I really hope this doesn't all end up being in Peter's head, and if it ends up being in Peter's head, I'm gonna be very depressed. What about you?
I don't know. I just think I want them all to be left in a better place than when we first met them. I don't know whether that means that Peter and Simone are together, though. I know they've got this whole "I'll see you in a year" kind of thing, but I don't know. Maybe their journeys aren't together. I just want them to have learned and to be living better lives, so that the message is sent out through this TV show that it's not too late, and that hopefully millions of people that are watching this can take these lessons out into the real world and spread some divine nonchalance.
I would like the team to stay together. I think I would be very disappointed if they each kind of went off in their separate ways and became strangers again. Whether or not Peter and Simone end up actually being in a relationship, I want them to maintain the relationships that they found during this experience.
Yeah.
That pretty much does it for this week. We've gone on quite a bit about elsewhere.
And this weekend we have our Podcast Away episode with Lady Justice coming out from Lady Justice, a true crime podcast. I spoke with Chantel last week, and last weekend we published our Jasmine Hodge episode, which was very fun. So make sure you listen to those. And we've got our next 4 people confirmed for Podcast Away. So people are very enthused by the idea, yeah. You can find us on all the social media. You can find us on all the places that you get podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio now. Also on YouTube. So if you like to get your media that way, go find us on YouTube. Subscribe on iTunes.
Also, Podchaser is donating 25 cents for every review on Podchaser to Meals on Wheels to help with the COVID thing. It's a really great site to check out your podcasts on. It's kind of like IMDb for podcasts. So yeah, go drop us a review all your favorite podcasts, and you'll be helping a great cause.